This is the Creative Life Show, celebrating being highly creative in a less creative world. I'm Joanna Peters, coach and mentor to professional creatives and creative professionals. And I talk to other creatives, innovators and thinkers about how we create, face down our critics, stay on track, get noticed and paid, and do the work we want to do. And I'm sharing the progress of my own book, all about creative people and how we thrive. Hello, welcome. It's the week of the 24th of September, and my life is certainly in full swing, as I imagine yours probably is. Now, one of the discoveries that I love about creative people is that we have differently wired brains, literally. And it makes us really good at taking in lots of different information at the same time. We take in lots of sensations, lots of ideas. We see things, we hear things that other people don't necessarily observe. But one of the flip sides of that can be that we find it more of a challenge to get it all organised, and we can end up feeling a bit overwhelmed. And that totally sums up what this fortnight has been about for me on my book. So lots of great research and lots of fantastic ideas, and I've been going round in circles a bit, deciding on a structure. And I certainly had to stand back this week and do a bit of thinking about where I really am going with it. And there are days I think, will this book ever happen? But it's going to. I absolutely committed to that. But what I love is when one of my podcast guests totally gets that. So whether you are feeling totally in control of your life or way too distracted, today's interview is for you. Hello and welcome. Today my guest is Anna Kunnecke. Anna is a writer and coach. She describes herself variously as a heathen mystic, an ADD mother of 5, the world's worst cook. She's been a florist, a brand consultant, and a bilingual voiceover artist. And she's built a very successful coaching business. One of her core coaching programs is called the Queen Sweep, which is all about creating order and beauty in your life so that you have the space for clarity around your ideas and actions. And I find this fascinating because Anna says she was the last possible person likely to create this, but that's exactly why she did it. Anna, it's such a joy to have you here. Everything you create just oozes creativity, joy, and a search for beauty. What does leading a creative life mean to you?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so delighted to be here talking to you. What does leading a creative life mean to me? Well, I think it means that I'm always searching for that joy and that beauty, and trying to balance the things that I crave, like joy and beauty and productivity, with, the ups and downs and the intensity of being a creative and how hard it feels sometimes and how lonely and how futile and hopeless. And I think so many of us create out of that place, right? It's like so many comedians. They're hilarious on stage. And when you meet them in person, oh my goodness, have you ever met more tortured souls than the world's funniest people? And I think that that is true for many of us, not to start us off on such a dark note, but I think that so many of us want to create beautiful things because sometimes the world feels so bleak and ugly to us.
And the process of creation in itself is, we think of it should be joyous, but it's so often not, is it?
Oh God, it's horrible. It's awful. It's the worst. The only thing worse is when you don't do it. And then you feel just a kind of terrible that is impossible to describe.
Yes, absolutely. The only thing worse than creating is not creating, isn't it, often?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about a time when you've hit a particular creative challenge. Talk us through that.
The truth is, I'm going through one of those periods right now. I am literally smack dab in the middle of wondering who I am and what am I even doing and what is the point? And, who I have all these children to feed. Why do I think that I should be pouring my energies into a purely creative project? That's crazy. And it's not even going well. Blah, 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 blah. All the stuff that can happen inside, I think, a creative person's head. And you combine that with the perfect storm that, right now, the political landscape, especially in my country, I'm an American, although I'm currently living in Canada, is just an absolute disaster. In fact, my president insulted the Prime Minister of Canada the other day on Twitter. And here I am, this American in Canada, trying to get permanent residency because I married a Canadian, thinking, oh God, thanks. You've now screwed up my chances. On top of screwing up my whole country. And sometimes it feels like the whole world. But to top it all off, I have to tell you that one of my favorite things about where we live is that we lived on the edge of town, and there was this beautiful field outside, and there were cows in it and sometimes horses. And we used to call it Narnia. We have this white fence in the back of our yard with this little gate, and you could open it, and the sunsets were gorgeous, and the cows would come right up to us, and we would feed the horses carrots. And there are literally tractors and diggers and horrible bright orange machines right outside my window making terrible noises, and they're tearing up Narnia, and they're going to put up another hideous subdivision with 80,000 tiny cookie cutter houses. And I have to tell you, it just makes me feel like life is hardly worth living, while also feeling guilty that I'm such a wuss and having such first world problems.
What are you telling yourself about this problem?
Oh gosh. Coaches are the worst, right? I do this to my people all the time. What's the story that you're telling yourself? Well, you mean the bad story or the good story? The helpful story or the unhelpful?
Well, let's talk about the unhelpful story.
I think the story that is so easy for me to tell myself is that as the breadwinner for my family of 7, I have no business even wanting or hoping to do any kind of serious creative work. And I should just give up and stop coaching these beautiful, wonderful, creative people that I love. And instead, find a way to do like weight loss coaching or like attract the love of your life in 3 easy steps or some other kind of what to me feels very inauthentic and kind of icky stuff. It's easy for me to say, oh, what am I even trying to do? This is crazy. I should be more practical. And for sure, I should give up this dream of being a writer.
Isn't that interesting how all the pressures of the world outside have eaten away to that core of your being to say, you shouldn't write?
Mm-hmm. And I know it's a terrible story because even as I'm saying it to you, even with the frame of saying, this is the terrible story, this is the dark place that my mind goes to, I literally feel sick to my stomach. I mean, I just feel like I've eaten something that has, that has gone off. And like, I feel nauseated almost, which for anyone out there listening is a really good sign that you're feeding yourself a really poisonous, toxic story.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yet somehow your own sort of shield against that world that we'll try and build has allowed those messages in, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And allowed you in a way to believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it as a shield, but that's an interesting way to picture it. Yeah. Yeah. I think of it almost like a path down into a dark patch of the woods where it's really swampy and like the air smells bad. I feel like, oh, I've gone down a road that I knew wasn't helpful. And so then it's my job to find my way back to the path and see if I can find my way through the brambles and find my way to a clearing or a big glorious stand of trees instead.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I have this sense of you as this very strong creative core, that who you are is about creating. The way your mind works, it takes in the brains of creative people are wired to take in information from all sorts of places, are wired to feel it, are wired to understand it in ways that the rest of the world actually can't. And that's kind of why we often feel misfits. But as though somehow your own belief in your own mind has been kind of dissipated by the outside world and the noise.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's funny, as much as being creative, defines us, like you said, I do agree with you that creative brains really are wired differently. As much as it's something that's such a huge part of who we are, I think there's also this cruel irony that sometimes the meanest thing we do to ourselves as creators is we doubt both our ability and our right.
And our need.
And our need. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you saying, well, maybe I should be a dating coach or a weight loss coach. Is that not actually saying, well, my creativity isn't important? Are you not I'm going to challenge you here. Are you not dishonoring that amazing brain that's been wired in the way it has been?
I suppose I am. I suppose I am dishonoring it. I think so many of us have this love-hate with our own minds, right? Sometimes my mind is a fountain of, it's true. I can say it. Sometimes my mind is an incredible fountain of creativity. It comes up with a million ideas a minute. And then the challenge is just to, give them life and form before my brain has generated a million more. But sometimes the same creativity that brings us so many good and new and interesting ideas can also be a fountain of, I don't even want to say negativity necessarily. It's partly just that things feel so intense. And I think we feel so open, as much as we feel open to all of that kind of beautiful, generative, be like the wonder of the world. I think so many of us also feel very porous and empathic, and open to all of the ugliness that's out there too. And so I don't think I'm the only person who sometimes has periods where it just all feels like way too much. And I think, what am I even doing? How can I begin to make a difference with my tiny little art, or work against the huge onslaught of nastiness that is flowing through the world at any given point in time?
What would making a difference even look like?
Well, if I'm going back to that original story that I was telling myself, the terrible one, right? The one that made me feel so nauseated. I've done enough coaching, and I am a coach myself. And so I can see that story and go, wow, that is a big steaming pile of horse shit. I hope it's okay for me to swear. I didn't ask you beforehand.
Absolutely. I think that sums it up beautifully.
And so I don't even believe that story. I can tell it to myself. I can feel how gross it makes me feel. I might wallow in it for a few hours or a few days, but over time I've done enough work on my own mind and my own spirit and heart that I do have the capacity to say, wow, that is a terrible and unhelpful story. What's a different story? And there's a bunch of stories I could tell, right? On the one hand, I could say, well, actually, the truth is, I love the women I get to work with. And, clearly they find value in it too, because I've now been doing this for years. And I do have this thriving, wonderful, flourishing coaching practice that supports my ginormous family of 7 people, which is such a gift and a privilege and an honor. So there's that story I can tell, which is true and makes me feel better. And then there's the story I can tell that says, even if it's all hopeless and pointless and we're all just grinding, toward doom and the sun is burning out, even so, who do I want to be? I still want to be someone who stands up and says, yes, but look, there's peonies and lilacs and trees and there's hope, right? Even if I'm saying that right up until the minute when the horrible orange digger grinds me into dirt, that's still who I want to be in the world. So there's that story I can tell myself. And then the even more fundamental story, I think, goes back to what you said about creatives needing to create. And the truth is that even if no one ever reads it, even if I never get an agent for these books I'm writing, even if in 30 years no one remembers a word that I've written, I need to keep writing and taking photos and, making my home its own work of art, all these bits of creativity that nourish me. I need to do them because they help me feel alive. That's how I feel most like myself.
And in this time, and maybe times before, are you able to keep that creativity going, or does that get pushed out by that negative story?
Good question. I think yes and no. So one of the gifts of running a business is that it makes some of these creative choices not really choices at all. They sort of become non-negotiables. So I send out a weekly, I call it a missive. You could say it's a newsletter or like a blog post. But I send one out to my kindred spirits every single week. And I have done this now for years. And so at this point, there's no drama or agonizing like, oh, am I going to write them something? Or if I just can't write something, am I going to find an old post that resonates and reshare it? There's no drama. There's no agonizing. It's just what I do. I do it every single week. And so in that sense, no matter what is happening, the gift of sort of putting yourself out there in that public way is that stuff keeps going no matter what, right? I keep showing up for my clients and my weekly readers no matter what. I think the piece for me that is harder to keep up and going are the creative projects that I'm working on that are kind of outside of my business, that are outside of that beautiful, thriving work that does support my family. So, for example, I wrote a memoir a couple years ago. It was very personal. It took me back into some of the most painful parts of my past. It was grueling to write. And at the end of it, I never could get an agent for it. And that was a really devastating creative setback. And I've rallied again. Now I'm actually taking my Queen Sweep program and I'm turning that into a new book proposal. And we're going to go through the whole process again. And it's those bigger projects which don't have any urgency around them, that it's much harder for me to stay on top of those and keep them going, because it's only me and my energy and my will and my desire that is pushing those, right? There's no external force saying, hey, you should really write a book proposal. Hey, don't you want to be a published writer? That's all coming from inside me, right? Whereas like if I have a client on the calendar, I'm going to show up for that client. I will show up in my people's inboxes every week because that's just what I do.
So that's absolutely about the value of habits and routines around creative practice, I think. And it's interesting about these other projects. When you're doing those other projects, are they energizing, or actually do they take up a lot of energy? They're not routine. They're not built into your process.
They take a huge amount of energy. And they're the first thing to go, right? So if I have 5 kids, so when a kid is sick, which happens on a pretty regular basis, right? Or, I'm traveling, or my husband is traveling, or I don't know, there's a school holiday and they're all home, all the kind of normal chaos of daily life. That's the first thing to go. Those big blocks of writing hours, or those little chunks of daily writing that I try to get in. It's absolutely the first thing to go. And on the one hand, I can beat myself up about it. At the same time, I am proud of the fact that I support my family. I'm proud of the fact that I show up for my business with integrity. And so if one of them has to go, it has to be my creative writing. And that's maybe not like a thing I'm supposed to say. And I don't think that it will be true in 10 years, right? When I have a 13-year-old instead of a 3-year-old. But for right now, that is just the truth of my life, right? Right now, my family's well-being is a non-negotiable.
So is it troubling you that those are by the side? Or actually, it sounds on one level that you're quite at peace with that.
It depends on the day.
Oh, yes.
I feel very proud of those choices. And yes, if I have to choose, am I going to live out some romantic fantasy I have of being a writer in a garret and my children are starving and, begging down on the street? Or am I going to show up and do my work like a grown up and run my freaking business like a professional? I choose to be a professional. Absolutely. I choose to be the grown up. But at other times I think, oh my God, what if I live my whole life and I never write the books that I want to write?
What does that make you do? Does it make you write, or does it make you go, oh, if only?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that for me right now, I'm okay with the fact that this is the reckoning that I'm doing at this moment. We all have to grapple, with hard choices in our lives. And I always say to my clients and, in my business that if you want a beautiful life, you have to be fierce about it. And sometimes that means making really hard, fierce choices.
It always strikes me how much you use language very precisely. And that word you use there as fierce, it seems to be something that resonates very strongly with you. What does fierce mean?
I've never been one of those people who just sort of sat down and words just effortlessly flowed out of my fingers. The process of creating anything really has always felt very arduous. It takes a lot of inner muscle to get myself to sit down and write really anything, even an email, let alone, a weekly essay or, a chapter or a coaching program. They all take a fair amount of fierceness. And I'm one of those people who truly, I'm afraid of everything. I was very scared as a child. I'm still kind of a frightened adult, which is embarrassing, but true. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of bugs. I'm afraid of ghosts. I'm afraid of like zombies. Like I'm very afraid. And I left to my own kind of inner instincts, I could be one of those hermits who just like never leaves her bedroom and sort of stays wrapped up in a hoodie and a blanket, like rocking back and forth all day long. I truly like that. That could happen. I could see how that could happen for me. And it takes some fierceness for me to do things that seem to be really easy for other people. Things like getting up every morning and, putting on clothes and brushing my teeth and getting the children out the door. Oh my God. It's like, and now I have this amazing husband and he actually is in charge of mornings. But when I was a solo mom, I was a solo parent for a good number of years. It was just me and my daughter. Oh, God, like the hours up until about 8:20 when I finally would drop her off at school, like they were the very hardest part of my day. Everything else that came after was easy compared to that. And I would look around and I would be like, nobody else seems to be having such a hard time with this. Why is that? Why is it that, I can do things that seem to look difficult to other people, but some of the most everyday, mundane, kind of prosaic, seemingly simple things just absolutely take it out of me.
Anna, that's a most wonderful lead into Queen Sweep, which I really do want to talk about. Tell us about Queen Sweep. You can explain it better than anyone.
Oh, the Queen Sweep is what I eventually named the process that was born out of pure desperation. I had no intention of creating a coaching program, or now it's becoming a book. I only had a desire to walk through the world like a normal appearing adult. That was my lofty goal. And what happened was that I was living in Tokyo, and before I got pregnant, I had actually been working as a professional actor. So I've been a different kind of creative at many different phases in my life. But in addition to being an actor, I was also a business consultant, which is a strange combination, but it was kind of wonderful and interesting and fed different parts of my brain. So then I got pregnant. I quickly realized that you cannot do theater as a pregnant actor unless you're a famous person. And so I switched over into doing voiceovers, and I started doing more consulting, and I took this coaching course kind of as a lark, never thinking I would ever become a life coach. Oh, the irony. And then I had my baby, and I'd always been a fly by the seat of my pants. Like I was an artist, right? I was a working actor, and I wanted to be a writer one day. And so that kind of like, oh yeah, I'm always sort of, I'm a little bit late to everything and I forget things. But it was okay. And I managed to make it for the important things. And then I had a daughter who I adored with my whole life, but most of my brain seemed to be going out of my body through the breast milk into her. And I just was like an even more frazzled, foggy, ADD kind of like absent-minded version of myself. And it was so painful. Like, it's sort of funny when we talk about being like, I forget things, or, I have a hard time, keeping appointments. It's funny. It's sort of comical, but it's actually quite painful when you're living it, right? The amount of shame that I would feel over, having forgotten to reply to, a bunch of emails, or having forgotten to put appointments on my calendar, or showing up to an appointment with the wrong set of slides to, for the presentation I was supposed to give or whatever. It felt really awful. And I began a pretty intense quest to figure out my life and figure out all of this adulting stuff that other people seem to figure out. And so because I'm an English major, of course, I read about 4,000 books on getting organized. Some of them were helpful. They were useful tidbits, but the problem was that they all were written by people who were organized, right? That's how they came to write books on being organized. And so most of their suggestions did not work for me at all. Like, you had to be an organized person in order to use their organizational systems, right? I did not have this linear brain that could keep track of things. That was the whole reason I was reading the books to begin with. And so truly out of desperation, I started to cobble together my own system. And I had one insight from this, a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, who's this wonderful guru in sort of the efficiency world. But the rest of his system just was an absolute disaster for me. It didn't work at all. And then I plucked one little bit from something I had read a long time ago in a book about ADD. And I stuck those two together in my life and I experimented, and it turned out that they worked pretty well. And so I just kept gathering little bits and pieces and putting them together in a way that was not for linear, organized, left brain, spreadsheet minded people at all. It was for right brained, kind of ADD, easily distractible, the creative mind, really. And I developed some systems and some tools that were starting to work really well for me. And so I started teaching them to the people in my like little business networking group. And I was like, oh my gosh, guess what I did to my calendar? It made a huge difference. And they would look at my little nerdy system and they'd be like, oh, well, maybe I'll try it. And anyway, that's how the Queen Sweep started, from those very kind of humble roots. And now it's this 9-week program. It's virtual, so people can do it from anywhere in the world. We band together through the magic of the internet. And for 9 weeks, we walk through your life and we tackle physical things like clutter in the home and what to do with paper. We look at money and we set up systems to streamline your bills, everything to do with money. We go into your closet and we clean out all the stuff that you never wear, and you get a little bit of clarity on how to put together outfits that you do want to wear. So it's this very kind of holistic 9-week sweep through your life. And it's all about clearing clutter, both physical and mental, and bringing beauty to the process, because beauty is this energy that really nurtures so many of us.
And I was really struck by you talking about the sense of shame that you felt. And I think that's such a common experience when I work with my clients who are creatives. That's so common. And it almost seems to me that beauty is the antidote to shame. They can't coexist.
That's a beautiful insight. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And so many of these women who come and do this course are not necessarily all self-described creatives. You know, many of them are professors, and they're like, I literally can write scholarly tomes that are read by thousands of people around the world, but I cannot find my glasses ever. And I have like 17 pairs, or
yeah,
right. Like, I am, the director of marketing for this huge firm. I manage, hundreds of employees and all of these different accounts and projects. And I'm such a boss at work, and at home, they turn my lights off because I forgot to pay the bill, even though there's plenty of money sitting in the account. Right. And there's this disconnect, I think, between being so good at some things and finding other parts of life so challenging and boring, and yet, necessary to keep life running smoothly.
And it strikes me that the thing that you do that's really different is that you say, let's make this playful. Let's make this fun. Let's make it about beauty. This is not about reading David Allen's book. It's brilliant, but it's very linear. Isn't it? It's about saying, let's bring our whole selves to it.
Yes. Because part of the reason I think that so many of us resist things like budgets and to-do lists and systems and routines is because they're boring. Right. And we creatives hate to be bored almost more than anything else. Don't waste my time. The world is such an interesting, fascinating place. Why would I waste any of it being bored? And so when you can make those seemingly, boring and prosaic parts of life actually kind of fun, and we infuse them with beauty, then it's like these things that looked really boring and tedious and like a waste of time can become almost like allies. Like I think about my relationship with my budget, which, oh my God, is there anything that creatives hate more than a budget? It feels so restrictive and, it's going to suck all the joy out of life. But I actually think of my budget as like this kindly butler figure. It's like, if I had to picture my budget is this very dignified butler who's like always showing up with like a nice, towel draped over his perfectly suited arm. And he's saying, yes, ma'am. And I'll say, do we have any whiskey? Do we have any scotch? And he'll say, yes, we do. Or no, ma'am, we don't. And that's it. He's like this ally who's helping me figure out, like, do we have this or do we have that? Do we have, a trip to Paris or do we have a trip to the movies? Right. And helping me make these decisions. And I feel so grateful for that, like grounded, sort of droll presence in my life.
And that's the point, isn't it? We start realizing how powerful it is when we can find our glasses.
Yes.
And when we do have clean surfaces. And I love this butler picture.
Well, and I am so easily distractible that truly whatever I put my eyes on, I will think about. So if I walk into my kitchen and there's like a can of olives sitting there on the counter, I went in to like get a pen so I could write down this idea I had for a blog post, let's say. And yet when I see the can of olives, I instantly have forgotten A, that I'm there for a pen, B, the idea for a blog post, and C, that I'm even supposed to be writing a blog post. Instead, I'm thinking about olives. Where do olives grow? I think they grow on trees. Olive trees. Mediterranean. I wonder if I should go to Greece one day. Once upon a time, I read a story about someone in Brazil and they were eating olives. Right? And I mean, some people think I'm exaggerating. I am literally not. So for me, one of the greatest gifts I can give to myself is to have clear surfaces that are not full of little like holes for me to fall down into. And some people really thrive on like a clear surfaces and minimalism. Some people really love more abundance. They love the kind of feeling of like lots of different things happening in their space. And so it's not about necessarily being a minimalist, but it is figuring about what does beauty mean to you? Because beauty is what nurtures us and nourishes us and sustains us through some of these dry periods. But it's also about setting up systems that run, whether they run in a very kind of minimalist way or whether they run, there's some bustle around it, but like underneath you've got this like strong little choo-choo train that's chugging along, making sure that your bills are paid and you know where your glasses are, or, you know, whatever it is. It clears away so much of the chaos, and it helps us step out of that place where we're always putting out fires and dealing with crises and things are blowing up in our inbox. And it does give us that space where we can think about things and we can have ideas and remember to write them down and then find that piece of paper later so that we can actually put them into the thing that we're working on. So I find that it's this huge gift of headspace as much as anything else, of mental clarity that comes when you clear that physical world and you wrangle it.
And it links back to what we were talking about earlier, doesn't it? The mental energy. If things are a habit and a routine, then we don't have to use that energy for them. They happen. And we use that energy for the things, the dreams that we really have.
And I find for me that when I am having a hard time, when I'm looking at the world and thinking, oh dear heaven, what on earth is even happening? Or, you know, when I have a dry spell in my creativity, or I'm working on something and it's just not working, when I'm doubting myself, whatever's going on, when I am having a hard time, one of the best things I can do is really go back to those basics. And for me, this is those practices of the Queen Sweep that sort of keep things moving along. But I remember as a little girl reading stories of how like the loyal, well-trained horses would like bring the wagon home, even when the driver had fallen asleep or whatever. And I think that that's how our habits can become, so that even if I'm not having a great day, even if I'm feeling really distracted or overwhelmed, there are all these things that are in place that help me find my way home and keep my family's life moving forward. You know, it's really simple things that are going to sound, you know, probably ridiculous, but I'll tell you some of them because they're actually surprisingly powerful. It's things like just making the bed first thing when I get up every morning. No drama, no agonizing. It literally takes 30 seconds making the bed, or keeping my desk clear. Or I have something I use called a compass, which is sort of like a hybrid between a to-do list and a calendar and a little piece of art. But printing out a compass every single day, which helps me keep my mind straight. It's all these little practices that on their own don't seem like a big deal. Always having flowers on my table or on my desk. That's another. So simple and yet really, really important to me, because it helps me remember who I am and what I want to bring to the world, and that there's always something beautiful you can look at. And it's those little things, and they seem so small, and yet when you put them together, they do have this enormous power to keep us moving forward, even when we're not feeling powerful and we're not feeling inspired and we're not feeling confident, you know, and we're not feeling like, yes, I'm going to take on the world and change it with my art. Even when we're feeling like, oh God, I hope I can just make it through today. Those really practical, tangible things do help us make it through the day. And they help us, you know, go to sleep in a peaceful bedroom and wake up feeling like, okay, all right, I'm going to try again today, which is really what it all comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah. And I love that sense that, yeah, we could trust our horses to bring us home, to bring the wagon home. Anna, where can people connect with you and find out more about Queen Sweep?
You can just go to queensweep.com. It's queen like the kind that wears the crown, and sweep like you do with a broom. Queensweep.com. There's a free 5-day mini course that will take you through super, super easy things you can do to clear out some of that clutter and bring in more beauty. Or you can always find me at my main website, which is declaredominion.com.
And I should also say that you've got a very active Instagram feed, which I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. Instagram is for me pure play. For me, that's like the one social media channel that I still really enjoy, and I'm not strategic with it at all. It's just for fun. And I need that. I think we all need that.
I think we do. Anna, thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a joy talking to you. And thank you for sharing that story. You know this. You're going to keep going because that creating is who you are, and we need your light.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening. So I'm sure you got some insights from this conversation. I'd love to know what they are. Do come and share them in the Creative Life Facebook group, or tag me and Anna on Instagram. It's fantastic to see what takeaways there are and how you're going to put it into practice. So have a wonderfully creative week, and I'll see you back here very soon.